Andrew, can you bring it up a little more? Thank you.
He's counting down 30 seconds.
Did we get the 30 seconds, Isaac? Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Writers' House. Thank you. That's the appropriate response. How many of you are at the Kelly Writers' House for the very first time?
All right.
Oh, wow. Jason brings in newbies. This place is open and free, and you're always invited. So, hi, I'm Al Filreis.
I'm Simone Mike.
Is this a thing we're doing?
Yes, we do this.
Yeah.
Do you want to go first? Welcome to the Writers' House. We already said that, but this is the second of 3 Kelly Writers' House Fellows events, featuring tonight. Why are we here? Jason Reynolds.
That's right. I think that's correct.
Yes.
So first and foremost, what we need to do is not just praise Jason Reynolds, but thank him for making the trip up from D.C. today and spending, as it turns out, 3 hours with the students in the Writers' House Fellow Seminar. So what we need to do is give, and he knows Philly, he doesn't know Penn quite as well as he knows Philly in general, but what we need to do is give a warm Philly welcome back to Jason Reynolds. Oh, it looks like you got the next one.
This one?
Yeah.
So tonight we're going to have a reading, which it will be a surprise to all of us. Jason will read from his work for about an hour. And after the reading, Jason will be available to inscribe your books. And if you'd like to buy books, we'll have them available in the back, just to the left over here, my left, stage left. And there's also these amazing, I think these are amazing and very beautiful and also free broadsides, which are, hand printed with.
Don't say too much because she's
Okay,
going to give it to him.
I'm not gonna say anything else. Okay.
That's Sophia's thing, but there is that. Yes,
Yeah.
there is that.
Okay, your turn.
Yeah. Well, but back to number 4 here.
Oh, back to number 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had an amazing session with Jason this afternoon, and what we have here is not just famous writers come and they give a reading, but they spend a whole day, a whole afternoon with the students in the Writers' House Fellow Seminar, and it was an amazing experience. And it's really important for us here at the Writers' House, for all of our friends to know why we do that. We don't want simply to have a venue for writers, particularly like Jason, who's not about, I read, you listen, I am, you're not, I'm famous, you're not famous yet, I'm somebody, you're nobody. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's got to be interanimated and interactive. And what we did this afternoon kind of was a model for that, where Jason did a lot of listening to people who read the work, thought about it, and it was just an extraordinary session. And that is what Writers' House Fellows is about every year. And so we're just proud of this program, which is now in its 23rd year. It was supported for 21 years by the late Paul Kelly, who believed in this project. And we're very grateful for Paul in his memory. And the books that we're selling, we've got, I think, 3 books that we're selling of the many. Ghost, which is volume 1 of this series. How many of you have read Ghost? Jason, look at that. Nobody's going to buy Ghost. They already have their copies. As Brave as You. Look how thick it is. As Brave as You. Yeah. You read As Brave as You. Pretty good. On a scale of 1 to 5 stars, what would you give it? Uh-oh. Oh. Okay, that's a 5. So that's a recommendation. Aiden gives it a 5, and that's on the back. Aiden says 5 stars. Anyway, we want you to buy this book and read it, and we also have this edition of Long Way Down, which many of you have read. Talk about an intense book. So those, and we're also, as mentioned, giving away the broadside.
Right. Am I really? Okay. Tomorrow morning we'll be back here at 10 a.m. for a brunch and Q&A. So Al Filreis and I will be talking with Jason in a more formal setting. It's not quite the setting of the seminar, but more like a live streamed conversation that'll be taking place at 10 tomorrow just for bagels, and then at 10:30 on time we start the conversation.
Yeah, on time. So many of you are going to be there at that event tomorrow. So we'll be set up. I mean, still a lot of people, but we'll be set up in a way that where Q&A is very possible. There are no seats available left for tomorrow. However, if you were planning to come tomorrow, you're in this audience, you know you're not going to be able to come, please let Sophia DeRose know, or me, and we will not happily but dutifully take your name off so that someone else can come. So if you're interested in being part of that conversation, let us know, and we would love for you to join. That's at 10 o'clock for brunch.
So this is a free program, as everybody knows. We're committed to always free and always open all our programs. The house is open pretty much all the time. It's the only house like this at Penn.
The only house where you don't need a card swipe.
That's right. Yeah, and we're all really proud to be part of that community. Although we want all writers to come here, both emerging writers and really, really sort of famous ones like Jason to come. We want you to know that this is your house, and this place is available to all writers of all ages, all abilities, and all levels of famousness.
So we're now going to turn the podium over to Sophia DeRose, and this is a good moment for us all to thank and honor Sophia DeRose, who's the coordinator of Writers House Fellows and who's done a heck of a lot of work to make this happen. There's Sophia right there. Sophia is going to more properly explain and give this gift to Jason, and then Freeman, one of the students in the class, is going to properly introduce Jason, and then we've got a reading. So thank you so much. Sophia DeRose is here.
Hi, y'all. Yeah, hi. I'm Sophia, as I mentioned. It's been a really long time since I've seen this room this packed, and I'm really excited to see it like this again. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, especially Jason. We're really happy to have you. I'm sure everyone in this room is really excited to hear you. And I'm just really excited to hear your voice fill this space again. A ritual of the Fellows seminar is to gift all of our fellows with something special, because we think it's really special that a fellow comes to visit this space and do this thing for us. So we did create this broadside in collaboration with the Common Press right here at Penn. A staffer, her name is Camilla Serifpour. She designed and created this one for you. And it reads, "You can't run away from yourself, ain't nobody that fast," from Ghost. So this is for you.
Right there. Kimia, will you raise your hand?
Yes, please. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's really lovely. We have about 40. They're free. So at the end of the program, if you would like to snag one, they're in the back where we're selling the books. So please feel free to grab one. And that's enough for me, honestly. So I would like to introduce a student who is in our fellows class this semester. I feel like I'm learning a lot from this student, and I think you'll glean a lot from what they're about to say. So with that being said, please help me in welcoming Freeman Diallo Perry Rab to introduce Jason for y'all.
Thank you all so much for being here. Sorry if I'm a little bit nervous. I was nervous meeting Jason himself, and I'm also a bit nervous to meet all the beautiful people he's inspired. But I'll just start. Is my volume okay? Everybody can hear me? Great. Thank you. I think no matter who you are, where you're from, what apartment you live in, or how fast you run, if you looked out and found there were eyes on you, feeling seen, you might try to do everything a little bit better. If you yelled out and were heard, you might want to explain what hurt you, or maybe even yell louder. I'm sure we've all had that moment where simply being acknowledged, addressed in our worlds made us feel like meaningful parts of them. I think for that reason, Jason Reynolds writes to kids like himself, maybe once invisible, giving new meaning to speak when spoken to. He pressures our calls for representation and dares us to demand reflections. He reminds us that stories being aware of us and accepting our faces as set details are okay, but perhaps ought to be second to the stories we know from home. And in this past month in our seminar here at Kelly Writer's House, spending the time to inspect how Reynolds approaches brotherhood, love, violence, black patriarchy, stoicism, community, and rampant imagination. I think it took a few of us back down our own paths, showing us the value in our untold stories. Reynolds uses unfettering and maybe even unflattering honesty to find a unique catharsis. Because between the silent toxins of white supremacy trying to erase black personhood and the high and daunting standards in producing and depicting black excellence, there are Reynolds' vital moments of black sincerity that dare us to dissect what it means to be human past binaries, complex characters. In challenging the novel to mutate for the black youth truths, he challenges us to understand the logic of conflict, the impossibility of simple villainhood, and the makings of chaos, giving us readers the supernatural power of radical empathy. And by the time you've just begun to understand the whys and hows of these trying and tragic scenes that we must know, with fresh eyes, you'll see a character's kindness, intelligence, sensitivity, loyalty, agency, or protective nature as the fire starter for unapologetic hope within turmoil, unassailable in both fiction and reality. Mr. Reynolds found his love for reading at age 17. Before that, what he consumed sounded more like, "Who got my back? Jersey got your back. Yo, tell me who got my back. The Bronx got your back. Yo, tell me who got my back. Brooklyn got your back. Yo, tell me who got my back. Uptown got your back." Well, I listened to it. Right? And not to pit two New York-centered literary classics against each other, but I prefer Black Rain to Gatsby. Snap it up, yeah, right? While maybe one isn't greater than the other, we most often adore paragraphs written to us. I say this to an audience who I know loves literature to remind us of the closed invitation problem in the novelistic tradition. For those of us outside intended audiences, being left ungreeted can dissuade us off walls of text. Being a black child, there are grandiose fictions that won't faze you like they might your peers. Because you'll turn your head at the post-racial, post-cultural, post-personal, fabricated world you're reading, maybe feel discouraged to make reason of the ongoing abstractions at home, believing your role in the page is a footnote on authors who are product of their time. Unless a hero can come and beckon us back, calling our names. Reynolds has shown that black children love literature. All children love literature, especially the letters written to us. He proves that our heads mustn't be yanked into place because kids are human and they find themselves. So they beg for another chapter of Stuntboy, remember what it means to be Miles, and run to ghosts for answers. Mr. Reynolds doesn't need to snap and demand for us to invest in his worlds, of course. They feel like our worlds. And so we realize the best stories aren't simply told, but remembered. With that, I ask you to please welcome our very own 2023 Kelly Writer's House Fellow, Jason Reynolds.
It's probably the best intro I've gotten in a decade. You know, what's interesting, I think, for me being here and looking at all your faces is there are so many places who don't consider the work written for children as literature. And so it's cool to be here and to look out and be like, yeah, we, Like it is what it is, you know what I mean, and it does what it does, and I want to make sure that I show love to the Kelly Writers House for that, right? For making sure that like literature in and of itself is inclusive, not just in subject matter and in race, culture, and creed, but also in form, which I think is very, very, very important. I'm gonna read. So I was trying to figure out what I was gonna read, and I was like, man, I'm gonna read something from here. This is not my book. Young brother in the front had it, thankfully. All of them got all kind of different books of it. When I was the greatest, like all my old stuff. And so it's cool to see so many different books. There's a lot of books. For those of you who don't know who I am or don't know what I've done, there's a lot of books. There's a lot of books. And so I was trying to debate, like, well, what do I want to read from? And I was like, this is one of my favorites as far as craft goes. And for anybody, has anybody read this book? A few of you. So, like, honestly, yeah, I should read this book. This is the only book I'm gonna be like, this is the one, But I do think there is, in terms of craft, it's my favorite of the books. It's a novel, but it's also a collection of short stories. You can read it however you want. You can read it as short. You can read it all together, and it'll work the same. And I want to read a particular story out of it. And I know I get an hour. I ain't finna read for an hour. So if that's what you came for. Then we're going to have a conversation. I am going to open it up for some questions, just because I just prefer to talk to the people. We could talk about the books and the work or whatever else you want to talk about, but I can't read for an hour in front of y'all. This is when I'm reminded, like, oh, this is Ivy League. I mean, y'all really be reading. Like, I'm not reading for an hour in front of y'all. Sheesh. Is that what people do? It's like an hour of just listening to people read. And I've been around a lot of readers, and ain't a whole lot of them that's that interesting. Sheesh. All right, this is a story in the book. This is story number, I think might be the second story in the book. This is the one that people know the most if you read this book. It's called The Low Cuts. The Low Cuts Strike Again is the name of it. My brother, I'm going to try real hard not to bend your book up, but I'll get you another one. If I mess it up, I can, I know somebody. All right, the low cut strike again. All I can tell you is, if you ever seen John Watson, Francie Baskin, Trista Smith, or especially Britton Bit Burns, the low cuts, you better watch your pockets. Because those four, they'll steal anything that jingles, even your hands, if you got them tucked and they making too much noise. Matter of fact, they take the pockets out your pockets if they could. Once they walked into a convenience store, one of the ones with that dish at the front of the counter that says, take a penny, leave a penny, and took all the pennies, leaving no pennies. A grab and get gone. Okay, they didn't do that just once. They did it all the time. They did it so much that the store owner started keeping the dish behind the register and doled out the pennies to shortchanged customers individually. Other times, Bit, Francie, John, and Trista would challenge people to quarter wars, which is when two people stand quarters up on a desk or a table and spin them like spinning tops, and whichever quarter knocks the other quarter over or lasts the longest wins. But the rules don't really matter to this crew. The opponent's quarter was getting pinched, or the opponent was getting punched. And 25 cents ain't worth a swole up eye. But the low cuts don't just take to be taken. They don't steal for fun. Actually, they don't even like doing it, but they do it because they have to. At least they feel like they have to. Before they named themselves the Low Cuts, they were part of another set that they had no choice but to be down with, the Free Lunchers. Sounded much cooler than it was. It didn't mean they got free lunch because they were special or because they were popular and loved so much that the school cafeteria offered them mozzarella sticks and crinkle-cut fries on the house. Instead, what it meant was their parents were tight, hard up, squeezed, strapped. Their folks ain't have any extra scratch to give for the itch of hunger, no lunch money. And that was true for each of the low cuts. Wasn't something they were proud of or something they were ashamed of either, even though other kids tried to make them feel a way about it. Yo, if I give you my piece of crust every day and you save it up, you'll have a whole loaf of bread by the end of the school year, was a joke told by a kid named Andrew Knotts, who, after Bit heard it, well, let's just say Andrew never cracked those kind of jokes again. For the record, Bit, John, Francie, and Trista weren't the only free lunchers, but they were the only free lunchers with parents who were cancer survivors. They'd been put together in an in-school support group run by the guidance counselor, Miss Lane. Sitting in a circle, passing a tissue box back and forth, talking about how hard it is to watch your parents skinny up, watch their hair thin and fall out, watch their bodies turn disloyal, how scary it is to think about whether or not their mothers and fathers were going to live, and if not, how they were all going to live without them. What the four of them never talked about was how all the surgeries and the treatments were what knocked everything in their lives and their parents' lives off track financially. It was where all the money went. That wasn't Miss Lane's job to bring that up. Not part of the kumbaya circles that Bit pretended to be too tough for. And the truth is, they wouldn't have known any of this if Bit's mother hadn't told him all her business. But she did. And Bit told that business to the others. And the others asked their parents if it were true. That's not for you to worry about, John's mother said. Breast cancer. Who told you that? Francie's father asked. Prostate cancer. We don't want to lie to you, Trista's father explained. Stomach cancer. True. And it was this, not the cancer, but the strain it put on everyone that formed the low cuts. They all cut their hair down to almost bald, a sign of solidarity, and started stealing. There was only one rule. We'll only take loose change. No dollars, no jewelry, no wallets, only change. Usually they used it for extras at lunch. Today, something else. The sound of the bell ringing, signaling the end of the day, might as well have been a starter pistol or an air horn. Something to make the low cuts go, and go they did. They burst from their classes. Bit and Trista from English, John from math, and Francie from Spanish class. And after stopping at their lockers, swapping books, packing bags, they burst from the school and gathered at the meeting place. There were 3 benches to the right of the double doors. The first was being babysat by some boy in a uniform holding a broken skateboard across his lap, stroking it like some hurt dog. The second was occupied by Gregory Pitts and his friends, swatting their arms through a cloud of body spray that smelled like cinnamon if cinnamon smelled like garlic. And the third bench was where the low cuts always met, a base chosen by Bit. Bit was the tiniest person in their crew and the obvious leader. He was always going on and on about how his growth spurt was going to come soon, and then he'd be the tallest, but ain't nobody believe him. And even though Bit was half the size of his friends, he was the biggest when it came to confidence and when it came to temper. He was known for knocking people out. There was this kid named Trey who was picking on John, calling him an old man because John had a patch of gray hair in the front of his head. He was born with it, a birthmark. Teased for it his whole life. Funny thing is, the gray patch, when cut low, looked more like a ringworm and would have made for much better jokes, which were the jokes Bit would have cracked if John weren't his low-cut brother. But Trey wasn't that sharp. John, you was born a senior citizen, Trey said. John, you look like you getting ready to retire from middle school, Trey said. John, soon you gonna need a walker to be a walker, Trey said. John, and that was the last John. Trey spoke before Bit's fist went in his mouth so fast it knocked him out in the middle of the crosswalk. Thankfully, the crossing guard, Miss Post, was there to wake Trey up. And while she was helping, Bit took off running. He'd done the same for Francie when boys were picking on her for having short hair, calling her Frankie, but she never paid them no mind. It never really bothered her. Francie always had a way of ignoring that kind of thing, the bigger person and all, but not Bit. Bit would knock heads, no question, and if no one was around, he'd pat their pockets after putting them to sleep, but only for loose change, of course. Trista wasn't the type who needed any kind of puff-up from Bit. She was the kind of girl nobody messed with. Nobody. She could slice you to slivers with one sentence. Plus, she was her daddy's girl, and he raised her up in martial arts, Taekwondo Trista. Everyone had seen her do a roundhouse kick at a school talent show, and that was enough for no one to ever try her, including Bit. The 4 of them together were the kids' teachers were concerned about, the ones they talked trash about in the teacher's lounge, the ones they marked as at risk, They were the ones Miss Walkley would wag her finger and shake her head at whenever they walked down the hall or sat together and had secret meetings at lunch. The way they were a braid of brilliance and bravado concerned everyone. Everybody ready? Bit asked, one foot on the bench, huddling everyone up. Trista was the only one not paying attention. She was talking to a boy who responded awkwardly like he was scared or something. No surprise. Trista, Bit shot her a look. Ready, Trista joined the fold, slipping her phone from her back pocket to check the time. It's 3:16. Truck comes in an hour, Francie announced. Let's see how much we got, John said, opening his hand. Some dimes, a nickel. Everyone else dug in their pockets and dropped their findings into John's cupped palm. A few more nickels, some found in the chain slots of the lunchroom vending machines. Others found deep in the pockets of unsuspecting skinny boys wearing unforgiving skinny jeans. Quite a few pennies found swept into the corner by Mr. Munch, the school's janitor. These had to be sifted out from dust bunnies, gum wrappers, and hair ties. Nickels and dimes swiped from teachers' desks, only from the top, never from the drawers. No quarters on this run, unfortunately. Trista moved the change around with her finger, counting 70, 80, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90? Bit asked, his eyes darting from John's palm to the double doors. Miss Walkley was always too close for comfort. Yeah, only 90 cents, Trista confirmed, counting it all again. She turned to Bit, who was rocking back and forth, anxious. You think that's enough? Bit spat. We'll make it work. He marched off, and the others followed behind, worming through the crowd and up to the light. They crossed and headed down the main road, Portal Avenue, cars and bikes zooming past, buses, both public and school, grumbling and screeching, smoke billowing from the tailpipes. Even though they were tight on time, they were loose on talk. Francie, in particular, was motor-mouthing. She always did when she was anxious, asking John if he'd ever heard of anybody named Satchmo because there was a kid in her Spanish class named Satchmo Jenkins, and she just liked the name. Nope, never heard of nobody else named Francie either, though, John said with a shrug. Yeah, but Francie is short for Francis, she went on. Well, maybe Satchmo is short for Satchmo Reese, Maurice, Satchmocha latte, Satch money, Bit sparked, annoyed by the silly conversation Francie and John were having, and also by the silly conversation Trista was trying to have with him. Bit, I'm serious, Trista was droning on. What you gonna write about being? Trista was referring to the English homework. Miss Broom wanted each student to write about being something else, but not a person, a thing. I keep telling you, Trista, I don't know, Bit replied as a school bus rumbled by. How about a school bus? That's good enough for you? Not really, Trista said. The school bus was coming to a stop, its brakes grinding. Bit covered his ears. I hate that sound. Matter of fact, I'd be a school bus that could fly. That way I ain't got to hit the brakes and make all that noise. Bit looked over at Trista. How about that? All I'ma say is I could totally see you, a school bus, falling from the sky. Trista laughed to herself, but just loud enough for Bit to hear. But at least then I'd be a rocket. After 6 blocks, they turned down Crossman Street, stopping at the first house, the one that sat on the corner, an older house with a bunch of cars parked in the yard, barrel grills and big wheels in the driveway, a mess, but the home of the munchie master, Miss Cece. Miss Cece had been the neighborhood candy lady since the Low-Cut's parents were kids. She was known for making sure everybody got a fair shot at sweet treats because she knew not everybody could get to the corner store. There wasn't one on the corner of Crossman. Actually, there wasn't one within 5 blocks, so she had to be it. And the best part about Miss Cece was that she was open 24 hours a day. With Bit leading the way, the Low-Cuts beelined up her obstacle course of a driveway and rang the doorbell, which chimed a melodic yawn like an old man just waking up. The Low-Cuts waited nervously, but Bit, full of fire and impatience, rang the bell again. And again. Come on, he growled. Ain't nobody got all day? Chill, Francie said. You know she moves slow. Sure enough, a few seconds later, they heard the sound of Miss Cece's slippers slowly sliding across the floor and her voice oozing through the wooden door. I'm coming, don't poop your pants. Trista smiled at that because Miss Cece always mentioned pooping as if the only people who ever rang her bell were people in desperate need of a bathroom. The door swung open and there she was, a small lady, jet black wig sitting on top of her head like a hat she'd purposely cocked to the side. The hair was too dark, especially compared to the few silver hairs springing from her chin. She wore a turquoise sweatsuit, the sleeves and legs cut off, threads hanging like a blue-green spider web. Her ankles were swollen, and so were her cheeks. If it weren't for the hair and the bumpy freckles, her face would have looked like a baby's. Her voice, on the other hand, sounded like a truck engine. Look who it is, eeny, meeny, miny, and mo, Miss Cece said, pointing at each of them. What y'all want? Well, John started, because John was usually the one who spoke for the crew, the nice one. He dug in his pocket, opened his hand, showing all the silver and copper. We got 90 cents, and we need candy, Miss Cece, Bit blurted out. Then clapping his hands together, he repeated, we need candy. Bit, Francie's voice was a warning to calm down, but Bit's ears didn't hear it that way. What? We do, and we in a rush. He tapped his wrist where there was no watch, checked it like checking a pulse, a live one for sure. Don't be rude, Trista said, calm. Like, too calm. So calm that even Miss Cece took a step back. Bit quieted down, huffed, rolled his wrist, and muttered, go ahead, John. We got 90 cents, and we need as much candy as you can give us, John explained. Miss Cece looked at the four of them, a stair step from John, the tallest, down to Bit. Do I want to know what y'all up to, she asked. And they just looked at her like she hadn't asked it, like she ain't say nothing. And she acted like she hadn't said anything either. Wait right here. The thing about Miss Cece's house was that kids could never go in unsupervised. Even though she knew them and their parents, she was always very careful about young people in her home buying candy because it basically was the plot of every abduction story she'd ever watched, and she didn't want people thinking she was doing that because she wasn't. So the low cuts had to wait at the door another few minutes until Miss Cece returned with a small card table. She set the table up just outside the house, then pulled boxes of candy from a small closet right by the front door where most people would hang their coats. She set the boxes up on the table. Okay. So today, in the penny, nickel, and dime categories, we got the old stuff. You always say that when we come here. Don't nobody want no stale candy, Miss Cece, Bit said, fighting himself to cool his tone. It's not stale, Britain. It's just older styles of candies, like how the Michael Jordan sneakers y'all be paying all that money for keep getting remade. That's what this is, retro candy, hard to get and used to cost only a penny a piece when I was a little girl, but I gotta charge y'all 4 cents more, attitude tax. Bit cocked his head, Miss Cece cocked hers right back. Let that be a lesson, son. Plus, everything costs more over time. Inflation, Francie said. Sounds more like deflation, Bit grumbled under his breath, patting his pockets. What you say? Miss Cece asked, adding the last box to the lineup on the table. Nothing, John subbed in for Bit. Okay, y'all know the rundown, Miss Cece said. I got Mary Jane's, Tootsie Rolls, Squirrel Nut Zippers. Bit did his best to trap his laugh, but a pfft slipped from his mouth. No matter how tough and tight he was, Squirrel Nut Zippers broke him every time. Let her finish, Francie said through his own giggles. Squirrel Nut Zippers, Miss Cece repeated, then continued with the list. Lifesavers, individually wrapped, Bitter Honey, Charleston Chews, Bazooka Bubblegum, and she popped back into the closet, mumbling to herself, then popped back out. I think that's it in terms of bang for your buck. They leaned over the table, looking at all the candy, trying to decide which was the right candy to get. Finally, Francie spoke up. What you think, Bit? Oh, now y'all care what I think? He snapped back. Don't be petty all your life. That was from John. We just know you know what to do with it better than us, Francie explained. You know how to use it. Exactly, Trista said, scratching her head. Miss Cece covered her ears. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Bit turned to her. I mean, you said this candy from when you were young, right? Miss Cece pulled her hands away from her face. That's right. So, which was your favorite? Miss Cece surveyed the table. I'd have to say it'd be a tie between the Mary Janes and the Lifesavers. I mean, that peanut butter mixed with syrup in the Mary Janes was like heaven, but the pure sugar of the Lifesavers was to little Cecilia a lifesaver. So we'll take as many of both of those as we could get. Miss Cece started counting them out, and a few seconds later, there were 18 pieces of candy in front of them, 9 Mary Janes, 9 Lifesavers. John 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 lets the coins fall into Miss Cece's hands, Bit scooping up the candy. Later, Miss Cece, he said, already walking away. Boy, one of these days you gonna learn some manners, she clapped back. Tell your mama I'm praying for her. Matter of fact, I'm praying for all y'all mamas, knuckleheads. Low cuts, Francie said, smiling. Right, low cuts, shortcuts, whatever. Y'all all be knuckleheads to me. Come on. Bit was at the end of the driveway, rocking back and forth antsy. We running out of time. They went back to the main road, back to the busy Portal Avenue with the cars and trucks and other kids, other walkers, lollygagging on their way home from school. What's the math, Francie? John John asked as he pulled a wad of sandwich bags from his pocket. Francie was the smartest low cut when it came to numbers. She could break it all down in her head in a way that would have taken Bit and John John a calculator to do, and Trista probably 2 pages of long division. 18 pieces. We do bundles of 3. That's 6 bundles. Sell them for $1 a pop. That's only $6, Bit said. Yeah, and that's enough, John John replied. No, we need more. We can get more. Bit had turned around and was walking backwards so he could look his friends in their faces. I know these guys. I know these kinds of guys. They don't carry change, ever. So we charge them $1.50 and they'll give us 2. Matter of fact, because we don't even have time for all these transactions, let's just do 3 bundles of 6, $2.50 a pop. They'll all pay 3 and we'll walk with 9. See, even though Francie was the best with math, Bit was the best with hustle. No doubt about it. When they got to Placer Street, which they'd practically run to after figuring out the numbers, they stopped on the corner, out of breath, and organized the candy. 3 Mary Janes and 3 Lifesavers in 3 bags. Trista slid her phone from her back pocket again. It's 3:44. We got 15 minutes. Gotta make this quick, Francie said, twisting the bags, tying knots at the tops of them. A block down the street, they came to a building that looked like an old house but had a sign out front, Placer Pool. The low cut stood outside, stared at the building for a moment, working up the nerve to go in, and whether the nerve was worked up or not, once Bit said ready, he took off for the door. It chimed when he pushed it open and stepped into the smoky building, John John, Trista, and Francie following close behind. Silence, except for one pool ball smacking against another. Then total silence. Old men like scraggly human cigarettes with non-human cigarettes dangling from their mouths, all turned and looked. And after a few awkward seconds, Bit ballooned his chest with bravery, rolled his shoulders back and said, "Candy for sale." A man came from behind an old wooden bar. "Kid, you can't be in here." Bit knew he couldn't be in there. He knew none of them could be in there, but he had been watching this place for a while. He'd been sitting across the street checking out who was going in and how long they stayed, the smoke that came screaming out every time the door opened, the cussing men who went on about losing money, and the laughing men who bragged about winning some. This was a place for pool players, but more than that, Bit knew it was a place for hustlers. "Don't I know you?" another man said. "Don't matter if you know me," Bit shot back. "Me and my friend selling candy. Say bye or say bye." John John, Trista, and Francie were impressed by that line. They'd heard Bit talk like this before. This wasn't the first time they'd done this. They'd walked into a bingo hall once and heard him telling the old lady he was her troll doll, the only good luck charm she'd ever need. But this time was different. There was a knife in his voice, something sharp they'd never heard. And the guy did know him, knew him from the neighborhood. That guy had fixed his mother's car once, and Bit had stood next to him, mean mugging the whole time the guy was under the hood just in case he tried to cheat his mom. "We don't want no candy. So how about we got Mary Janes and Lifesavers?" Francie joined in, held the bags up like they were full of gold coins. "Yeah? We got Mary Janes and Lifesavers," Bit said, doubling down. "Mary Janes?" a man wearing an eye patch called from the back of the room. He set his pool cue down on the table next to him and walked toward the low cuts. "What y'all know about Mary Janes?" "We know we got them, and Lifesavers too. Individually wrapped," John John added, just because it was a detail Miss Cece kept adding. The man chuckled. "I can't remember the last time I had a Mary Jane." He slapped the guy next to him. "You? Been a long time. Used to go down south to visit my grandpappy, and he'd always had that kind of stuff in his pocket. Be all melted and still be good. And grandma used to give us strawberry candy, and when she ran out, she'd give us cherry Lifesavers. And them butterscotch," from another man. "Woo, and don't get me started on them squirrel nut zippers." This came from the guy who ran the place. All this is great, gentlemen. Bit put a pothole in the middle of memory lane. But like the man said, we ain't allowed to be in here, so how much? Eye Patch asked. Bit turned and looked at his friends, bounced his eyebrows just slightly, just enough for them to see. Bundles of 6, 3 of each candy, $2.50. $2.50? That's penny candy. At least it was when I was coming up. Eye Patch couldn't believe it. My mother said gas was $1 when she was a kid, Bit shot back. And I heard Jordans cost like $80, John followed again, stealing Miss Cece's line. Guess everything costs more over time. The low cuts in what seemed like one fluid motion all shrugged. I tell you what ain't never been cheap. Kids, Eye Patch said. And I'll tell you what's hard to find. Mary Jane's. One of the other men said, digging in his pocket. He clearly had no idea that there was a woman who sold him right around the corner. You said $2.50? Yeah, Bit said, bouncing on his toes, anxious. You got change? Bit looked at his friends again, bounced his eyebrows again. Nope. The man pulled $3 from his pocket, handed it to Bit. Francie handed over the first bag. Trista spoke up. Thank you. Hey, I took them dollars off him. He replied to Trista, but pointed to a red-haired man who just laughed and muttered something they couldn't hear. 8-ball corner pocket, cha-ching, the buyer pumped his fist. And that was it. The last 2 bags were snatched up immediately because it turned out the thing about men in pool halls is none of them want to be outdone. For John, Francie, and Trista, it was like looking at a room full of bigger bits in the future. $9 later, the low cuts were out the door and almost out of time. Trista didn't bother checking her phone. They knew they were late because they saw the ice cream truck pulling off from its usual post in front of the 5th house on Placer Street. It hadn't been there when they'd gone into the pool hall. It arrived at 4 every day and never stayed if kids weren't waiting there to buy anything. Gone by 4:02. It was 4:03, so they ran. All 4 of them broke out down the street, sprinting, screaming for the ice cream truck to stop. Halfway down the block, it finally did, and the low cuts ran up to the truck, slapping their hands on the side of it. The driver yanked the window open. Almost missed me, the ice cream man said. He looked more like somebody's big brother than an ice cream man. What can I get for y'all? 4 vanilla soft serves, Bit ordered. Cup of cone. Cup. Sprinkles? Francie, John, and Trista looked to Bit. Sure, Bit said. On all 4? Yep. Bit didn't ask anyone else, and no one contested. The ice cream man handed cup after cup through the window, rainbow sprinkles all over them. Bit passed them down so that each of the low cuts had one, then handed the ice cream man the $9. It's only 8, the ice cream man said. $1 for you, Bit replied. Thanks for stopping. As the ice cream truck pulled off, John, Trista, Francie, and Bit walked a few houses down until they got to a small house they'd all been to before. That Trista and Francie always called cute. John never called nothing, and Bit called home. Bit pulled his key out his pocket, unlocked the door. Ma, he yelled, you dressed? Seconds later, Bit's mother, Miss Burns, came from the back and was greeted by all of them, the low cuts, holding cups of fresh ice cream. Not one swirl licked. Not one spoonful missing. Miss Burns looked at them, her face both cloudy and sunny, her skin absent of her normal brown. Bit's mom had relapsed. The cancer had come back. But the doctors were optimistic she could beat it again. Hey, what's going on? How was school? Bit's mother asked, kissing him on the forehead. But he shrugged off the question. How was your first day back on chemo? Oh, it was chemo. I'm okay. But she sounded exhausted and rubbed her stomach, a little queasy. I figured you would be, so we got you a bunch of ice cream. Bit waved his arm like a game show host showing off the 4 cups. Vanilla, he said. The other low cuts watched Bit the hustler, Bit who could turn 90 cents into $9 into ice cream, turn into a son who was scared, a son who loved his mom. And she smiled, her shiny eyes jumping from face to face, bald head to bald head, friend to friend, with sprinkles. I think we do. How long was that? It's 7:10. It's 7:10. How long was that? 20 minutes? About? I'll read one more, then we'll still have 20 minutes left. Everybody okay? Nobody know that story? What books y'all be reading? All these people in here. The boy in the black suit. That's my favorite too, actually. Shout out to the boy in the black suit. All right, this is a story you'll recognize. The kid from the ice cream truck in that book when he's like, oh, the ice cream truck looked like somebody. He don't look like an ice cream man. He looked like somebody's brother. So then you'll get whose brother he is in this particular story. This story is called 5 Things Easier to Do Than Simeon's and Kenzie's Secret Handshake. I've never read this story out loud. This is like, yeah, so we'll see how this goes. Number 1. Getting through the crowded hallway after the bell rings. Simeon Cross was big for his age. Big, like 2 kids tall and 2 kids wide. A walking anvil with a happy-gappy smile that lit every doorway he darkened. Impossible to miss when he was around and impossible not to miss when he was absent. So when the bell rang, Simeon got up from his desk in Mr. DeVonzo's class, grabbed his backpack off the floor, and waited by the door while all his classmates filed out, jumping up to give him high fives. Everybody but Ty Carson, who bolted out of class probably because Mr. DeVonzo couldn't stand people asking to go to the bathroom. There's no time for breaks when it comes to understanding the world around you, he'd say. And everyone else had gone. After everyone else had gone, Simeon walked over to Mr. DeVonzo, and they slapped the backs of their hands together, knuckles knocking like tiny pool balls, their secret handshake, which was nothing, elementary, compared to the complex system he and Kenzie had. Kenzie Thompson was small for his age. Tied for the smallest kid in his class with another boy everybody called Bit. Kenzie didn't have a nickname like that, and if anyone ever tried to give him one, he would do nothing. Well, that's not true. He would do something, but that something would be telling Simeon, and then Simeon would do nothing, because when you're Simeon's size, a look is more than enough. Kenzie's name, though only 5 letters, was longer than he was. But other than his smallness and the fact that he carried a blue bouncy ball everywhere he went, there was really nothing else about him that stood out. He wasn't particularly tough or loud or funny or sad or weird or even smelly, just Kenzie. Maybe he'd speak in class, maybe he wouldn't. Got good grades when he studied, bad grades when he didn't. Wasn't dripping in name brands, but always clean, and was friends with everyone, but really friends with no one but Simeon, and Simeon was friends with everyone because being his enemy just wasn't smart. Kenzie walked the middle of every line until the bell rang, and then something else. Kenzie never rushed out of Mr. Fantana's class like the rest of the students, not because he had some kind of special love for life science, I mean, it was okay, but because he knew he'd never make it to his locker with the hundreds of other kids traffic jamming and bumper carring around, not paying attention to the fact that their elbows were right by his face. He'd been hit before, several times, had his eyes swollen accidentally by girls who swung their arms around to make sure their friends understood the importance of whatever they were saying, had his lip busted because some boy was pretending it was 5 seconds left in the fourth quarter. Curry with the ball, he shoots, he scores, and he punches a kid in the face while hitting his crossover. That kid, Kenzie. For him, the hallway was a minefield, and there were hundreds of active minds dressed in T-shirts and jeans. So he waited while Mr. Fantana gathered his lesson plans, put the tops back on his dry erase markers, waited and waited for... Yo, Simeon came bursting into Mr. Fantana's room. Fantana Banana was good, was hood, was new, was true. Simeon gave Mr. Fantana an awkward handshake that looked like Mr. Fantana was trying to figure out how hands work. Took you forever, bro, Kenzie said, getting up from his desk. My bad, man, Simeon said, reaching out for Kenzie's hand. Don't, Mr. Fantana sparked up. Don't do that handshake in here. Not because I think anything is wrong with it. It's just, I really want to get going, guys, and that handshake y'all do takes way too long. I know you probably won't believe this, but teachers have lives too. Mr. Fantana smirked, then went on shoving papers into his leather bag. Wow, Mr. Fantana, I thought you were all about life science. What we were getting ready to show you was life science in full effect, Simeon explained. I am, and I love y'all, but not today. Then he pointed at the door. Please. Simeon didn't argue. He just turned back to Kenzie. Come on, Kenzie. I don't want to be nowhere we ain't welcome. Simeon, cut it, Mr. Fantana started, but Simeon shut him down. Nope. You said what you said, and the damage is done. Simeon bent his knees, squatting just enough for Kinsey to get a running start to jump onto his back. And off they went, out into the busy hallway, stumbling into the busy hallway of stumbling, awkward bodies, pinballing around, bouncing into one another and off lockers. Simeon, bigger than the rest, was unbounceable. He couldn't be knocked down or pushed out the way. Ready, Simeon asked Kinsey over his shoulder. Kinsey had his arms wrapped around Simeon's neck, tight enough to hold on, but not tight enough to choke him. Let's do it, Kinsey called back, and off they went. Number 2. Getting out of trouble with Miss Walkley for pretending to be in a horse race. But Miss Walkley, we not pretending to be in a horse race, Simeon pleaded. Miss Walkley stood at the door to the school, her face a pink raisin, made raisinier whenever she was in discipline mode, which was all the time. It was pretty much her job to tell everyone what not to do. Stop making fart noises. Stop dancing like that. Stop rapping. Stop singing. Stop laughing. Stop acting like children. Mr. Cross, Mr. Thompson was just on your back yelling yee-haw while circling his arm around in the air as if winding in an imaginary lasso, Miss Walkley demonstrated, and it took everything in both boys to not crack up. That's just how he talks, Simeon said. I'm going to say this to you for the 1,000th time, Miss Walkley steamed. All feet should be and stay firmly on the ground. But what about Pia Foster? Her feet be on a skateboard. This from Kinsey. It wasn't snitching because everybody knew Pia skated through school. The one time anyone had ever seen Simeon hurt was when Pia skated over his foot. And I've told her not to do that, but we're not talking about Miss Foster, are we? No, we're talking about you two. Miss Walkley folded her arms. I've given you so many warnings, and you don't seem to take me seriously. So wait. Before you write us up, I think it's important that we at least let you know why we do it. Miss Walkley sighed. She'd heard their excuse, different versions of it, time and time again, but they were always so entertaining that she was game to hear it once more. See, here's the thing, Walkley Broccoli. Can I call you that? Simeon asked. No. Got it. Here's the thing. Kinsey here got a big heart, but that big heart happens to be in a small body. Now, I don't know about you, but I would hate for that heart to be broken because that body was knocked around. That would be a travesty, Kinsey corrected him. Travesty, Simeon repeated. And so because I love Kinsey, I protect him. I make sure he can maneuver down these busy hallways without worrying about anything. I'm basically his bodyguard. Tell me something, Mr. Cross. How exactly does Mr. Thompson get from class to class during the day when he's not with you? Simeon knew this was a setup. I knew you were going to say this, and I know where you're going with this, and I don't know because I'm not with him, Miss Walkley, but I can only imagine how scary it must be. Simeon put his arm around Kinsey. Kinsey turned his face into a puppy's. Is that true, Mr. Thompson? That the hallways are scary for you? Oh, Miss Walkley, you got no idea. Just the other day, Joey Santiago didn't see me standing behind him and just backed me into my locker. Like backed him all the way into it, as in his whole body was in. I understand what he's saying, Mr. Cross. He has a mouth. Exactly. He does have a mouth. Simeon was right there with her. He also has arms. He got legs, feet, and hands. And in the same way you don't want him silent, you also don't want him invisible, do you? Yeah, you don't want me to be invisible, do you, Miss Walkley? Miss Walkley's tight face was still tight, but a little less tight than it was when Kinsey and Simeon had gotten pulled over by her. If I could just make one more point, Miss Walkley, she cut Simeon off. You can't. Please just go home, come back tomorrow, ready to follow the rules. Miss Walkley marched off, the sound of her clunky heels clacking loudly. She turned and added, when you two grow up, I really hope you become more than a horse and jockey because people lose a lot of money betting on horse races. Not if they bet on us, Simeon zapped right back at her. Plus, I want to be a lawyer, Kinsey said, trying to control the sting in his throat, because they smart and they know stuff like jockeys don't say yee-haw, cowboys do. Number 3, getting to the neighborhood. Outside was what outside always was, a spill out of inside. It was like the main hallway was the river that led into the ocean of backpacks, ball caps, and braids, energy and engines roaring. The roar of school is finally over. Yo, you got old Waka Waka out of here with that cowboy line. Plus, I ain't no horse. I'm a friend. Your brother, Simeon said to Kinsey as they walked up to the corner. Miss Post, the crossing guard, was standing there with her arms out. Hey, boys, she said. Kinsey leaned in for a hug. Hey, Miss Post. That hug happened every day between Kinsey and the crossing guard, a walking ritual. Staying out of trouble, she asked. Of course, Simeon said. Matter of fact, I'm going home to do my homework because we have homework. Not sure Canton here told you this or not, but there's homework. Canton was Miss Post's son. He was sitting, leaning against the stop sign on the corner waiting for her like he did every day. Canton just shook his head, paying the big guy no mind because everyone was used to him being silly. And what about you, little man? Miss Post addressed Kinsey. Staying out the street? Trying, Kinsey followed, holding the blue ball up as if she could look into it and see the day's behavior. What about you? Simeon now asked Miss Post, who had put a hand up to signal for other walkers to hold tight on the corner and wait for her whistle. Best I can, she replied, popping the silver tweeter in her mouth and stepping back off the curb. Catch you tomorrow, Miss Post, Kinsey said, waving as he and Simeon turned right. Most walkers went left down Portal Avenue toward some of the other neighborhoods. But to the right, up Portal Ave, is where Chestnut Homes were, where Simeon and Kinsey lived. Took no time because there were very few of their classmates going that way, and the ones who actually lived there didn't walk there. So the path was clear, laid out for Simeon the Grand and Kinsey the Great like a runway to their kingdom, a kingdom where carrying a person on your back was allowed, encouraged even, a kingdom where kings are throned and dethroned daily, where the crown jewels get dropped down sewers and flushed down toilets, a kingdom full of princes like Kinsey and Simeon, princes no one ever bet on anyway. Anyway, like I was saying, we family. Simeon nailed down what he was going on about before they stopped to talk to Miss Post. Exactly, you my brother, Kinsey confirmed, bouncing the blue ball as they approached Chestnut Street. The way Kinsey and Simeon thought about it, Chestnut Street is a paradise. Light poles are like palm trees, bus stop benches like hammocks, and corner stores like island bungalows. There's a smell in the air, a mix of exhaust and exhaustion, also cooked food and cooked hair. There's a feel in the air, a stickiness like walking through an invisible syrup, a thickness to life. There's a sound in the air, a shrill and chill, the scream and whisper of the world making a symphony of so good and so what. Also the sound of Kinsey and Simeon, their voices still young, still sweet, like flutes cutting through. Most people tighten up when they walk down Chestnut, tuck tails and tuck chains. But for Kinsey and Simeon, this was where they could let loose, where they could run and slap the street signs, pretending to dunk, where they could stand on the blue mailboxes like pedestals or see who could balance the longest from the tip top of a fire hydrant, where they could open random doors of random shops and speak to the owners, Mrs. Wilson's beauty supply store, tell your mama I got new wigs, or Mr. Chase's hardware store, your daddy get the sink to stop leaking yet, or Sue, who owned the Chinese restaurant and was always too busy to speak to them, but nowhere was better than Fredo's. Number 4, picking the perfect snack from Fredo's corner store. Walking into Fredo's was like walking into a dungeon, no matter what time of day it was. The light was always dim and the shelves were packed so high that you couldn't see over them. Walls of whatnot, no windows, big enough for the world's snacks, but too small for anything else. Always smelled like incense smoke trying to mask dirty mop water. Kinsey and Simeon came through the door with the kind of confidence of someone who owned the place. Fredo, Simeon called out, throwing up a hand while heading toward the bundt cakes and boxes of mini donuts. Well, if it isn't Wreck-It Ralph and Tiny Tim, Fredo shot back. He was flipping through the newspaper, licking his fingers every few seconds to turn the pages as if anyone could read that fast. You know, I look through this paper every day hoping I don't see y'all faces. You never will, Kinsey said, unless it's for something good. Something good like what? Fredo asked, setting the paper on the counter. Something good like me becoming a big-time lawyer, Kinsey replied. Yeah, or like me becoming a famous actor, Simeon said, so I can act like a big-time lawyer. He picked up a snack cake, turned it over to check the expiration date. No telling how long Fredo kept things, and they bought cakes that tasted like bricks before. Listen, it's more likely a school bus will fall from the sky. Ouch, Simeon gripped his chest dramatically. Don't get me wrong, I hope all that happens so y'all can buy this store and I can retire, kick back, and watch Law & Order marathons all day, every day. Well, we'd have to change the name of this place, Simeon said, accidentally bumping bags of chips off the shelves behind him, to something like K&S Food or S&K Food, Kinsey suggested. Fredo knitted his fingers together, rested his hands on the counter like some kind of judge. Okay, gentlemen, whatever you say. A few moments later, Kinsey and Simeon were at the counter, a bag of chips for Kinsey, a snack cake for Simeon, a moon pie. 50 cents each, boys, Fredo said. I got you, Simeon said to Kinsey, sliding Kinsey's chips over to be included with his cake. Okay, so that's going to be $1, big man. And then came the change. Simeon reached into his pocket and pulled out a fistful of dimes and nickels and pennies, slapped them down on the counter, and started separating them and counting them out as if he was setting the checkers board. Kinsey chuckled. He was used to Simeon doing stuff like this, and seeing all that change on the counter, he couldn't help but think about how Bit Burns, Kinsey's short twin in school, who had a reputation for patting people's pockets and stealing their change, would never try that on Simeon. Hold on, let me count it out, Simeon said. 5, 10, 15, 16, 17, 27, 28. How your brother, Fredo asked Simeon. He all right, probably somewhere in the street driving that old ice cream truck around fronting like he legit. Fredo nodded, then nodded at Kinsey. And what about yours? I see you still carrying that old handball of his everywhere you go. You know he ain't no good at that game, right? And before Kinsey could answer, Simeon got frustrated and slammed his hand on the counter. You made me lose count, man, Simeon boomed. Now I gotta start all over. 5, 10, 15. Okay, Fredo said, scooping the right amount off the counter and into his palm. We'll be here all day. Where you gotta go, Fredo? Simeon taunted him. To your mother house. Ask her how many times she dropped you when you were a baby. Oh, no need to ask her that. I can tell you. She only dropped me once into a vat of gold. And a vat of gravy, Fredo cracked, but Simeon didn't laugh. And because Simeon didn't laugh, Kinsey stepped up. Better chill, Fredo, Kinsey warned. Matter of fact, just for that, and then up on his tippy toes, he reached over and grabbed Fredo's newspaper off the counter. And when Fredo didn't budge, Kinsey snatched his lighter too. This got Fredo's attention. No more cigarettes, they bad for you anyway. No more of them booty funk incense either, Simeon said, opening the door, his laughter lingering in the store after he and Kinsey left. Such silly things to take, a gossipy newspaper and a lighter, as if Fredo ain't owned the store. One with a bunch of newspapers and matches and lighters behind the counter. But still, it was about the principle, the loyalty, the brotherhood. Number 5, making wishes. When Kinsey and Simeon made it to their building, the building they'd been living in their entire lives, they sat out front on the steps. Whole walk home, they laughed about Fredo, making up silly jokes about him. Fredo looked like a puppet, like somebody got his hand up his butt controlling him, Kinsey snapped. He looked like the type of dude who would own a store that just sells snacks. Like, you know what kind of guy you gotta be? You know what kind of guy you gotta be to just sell snacks? Snacks? From Simeon, who now had the newspaper rolled up like a tube. He swung it around like a short sword. What do Fredo even mean? I mean, if it's Alfredo, that would explain it because he definitely cheesy, Kinsey piled on, bouncing his ball back and forth under his legs. A slight breeze blew litter around, plastic bags floating like jellyfish in a deflated birthday balloon. One of the shiny metallic ones lifted and zipped through the air like happy shrapnel. Exactly, cheesy, but I can't front. He got me with the gravy joke. Simeon followed the balloon with his eyes as if it were a football thrown long or a messenger pigeon with a note from afar. A smirk crept onto his face. Yeah, he did, Kinsey agreed. And they both cracked up. Kinsey set the ball down, opened his bag of chips, offered Simeon some. Nah, I'm good, Simeon said as the balloon floated out of view. But give me that lighter. Kinsey handed Simeon Fredo's lighter, unsure of what he was going to do with it. He couldn't grow up to be a lawyer if Simeon was getting ready to set something on fire. Jokes were one thing, but burning stuff down was something totally different. Simeon unrolled the newspaper, glanced at the front page, which was a story about a school bus falling from the sky, and ripped it in half, then ripped the half in half and twisted it into a paper worm. At least that's what it looked like. Then he took the moon pie from its plastic, his huge fingers crushing most of it, trying to slide it out perfectly. Happy birthday to you, Simeon. Happy birthday to you, Simeon started singing in a fake opera voice. Happy birthday to you. What? Happy birthday, dear Kinsey. Happy birthday to you. Simeon stuck the paper worm into the moon pie, making it a wick. Then he lit the end of it on fire. Happy birthday, my man. I would have sang you the black people version, but I didn't want to turn this special moment into a concert, Simeon said, holding the moon pie out for Kinsey. The growing flame licked the air. It's not my birthday, bro. Quick, blow it out before it turns the moon pie into a s'more. Kinsey gave in, leaned over. And don't forget to make a wish. Kinsey thought for a moment, then huffed the fire out. Bits of scorched paper flying off like black snowflakes, the smoke corkscrewing up into the air. What you wish for, Simeon asked. I ain't telling you because then it won't come true. True, Simeon said, standing up. Well, since I can't know your wish, I might as well go get at this homework. Mr. Devanzo wants us to write about environmental something. I don't know, but I know I'll get a better view looking out my apartment window. You can see more from up there. Simeon pulled the paper out the moon pie. He split the snack, stuffed half in his own mouth, and gave the other half to Kinsey. Yeah, I'm out too, Kinsey said, back on his feet. He shoved his half of the moon pie in his mouth, slipped the ball in his bag, had to free his hands for what was coming. The handshake. They grab hands, shake, slide, finger grip, shake, then point to themselves, double fist bump, throw a peace sign beside each other's right ears, point to each other, slap their individual fingertips together, rub the air as if they were holding a ball bigger than the one in Kinsey's bag. Then they thumb their chins and shake their heads at each other before ending it with a big hug. Brothers, Simeon said. Brothers, Kinsey repeated, his voice muffled by the moon pie he was still chewing. They did it just like they'd watched their older brothers do it. Same shake. The same secret, the same bond, on the same steps. And as they rode the elevator up to separate floors, Simeon on 7, Kinsey on 9, Simeon looked at Kinsey knowing what he wished for, and Kinsey looked at Simeon knowing Simeon knew that he wished the smoke from the paper candle could drift, could carry a note through the air, across the city and state, over the lands and highways he'd never been on, through barbed wire, stone, and iron, ghosting its way through bars and into the ear of his brother, to tell him how he wished he didn't have to walk home from school, how he wished his brother Mason could pick him up in a car, just like the car Simeon's brother Chucky had stolen almost 2 years ago, the one Mason took the hit for, went down for, but not that one, a different one, and took Kinsey for a ride, maybe even showed him how to play. All right.
Jason Reynolds, how was that, huh? So I've got a portable mic, and there's a lot of people here, but we have time for some questions. Just got to wait for me to get to you so everybody can hear the question. And here's one conveniently right near me.
Hi. First of all, thank you for being here. And as a teacher, thank you for making my job a lot easier. My kids love to read because of you. And I just wanted to tell you quickly, just yesterday, one of my kids finished the Ghost series, and she was like, Miss A, I need more Jason Reynolds book recommendations. Not book recommendations, but yours. So we're getting her those. But I wanted to know, what do you wish you knew when you were first writing and publishing your first books?
That's a good question. What do I wish? Basically, that the art and the business are completely different, and that at the end of the day, there's and that publishers don't know that much. So like I can look back at like everything I've done, and every single step of the way they told me that it wouldn't work. When I Was the Greatest, which is this book right here this young man has, when I Was the Greatest was written, they told me that nobody wanted to publish it because they said that there is no market for books about regular black boys in regular neighborhoods, that it wasn't a thing, and that there was no market for it. Then it came out and everything changed, right? Then they said when the track series came out, it was like, well, there's really, at the time, there was no, or there were very few, there was no middle grade series that was about black boys that was contemporary fiction. So like everybody loves Percy Jackson, but it's like, yeah, Percy Jackson is amazing, but also is in a different, it's a fantasy series, right? And so like all these series were these but I'm like, what about like the kids who like me who didn't read fantasy growing up? And so like they were like, well, it's not gonna work. And I was like, well, we'll just see. Then it was Long Way Down. They were like, we're not sure that this is gonna work because at the time, verse wasn't what it is now. Novels, right? It was like we had some, but they were spaced out like 10 years at a time, 5-10 years at a time. And like we don't know if it's gonna work. And then it worked. And then I wrote Look Both Ways, and they were like, kids don't read short stories. It's not gonna work. And I was like, which is why it doesn't say a short story collection, which is what it originally said. said. And it's like, oh, a tale told in 10 blocks, right? And it's like, it's really just a novel, connected short stories, right? But they wouldn't put short story on the cover because they were like, kids don't read short stories. And then it worked, right? And then that, right? And on and on and on and on and on. And so what I wish I would have known, and what I found out very quickly, is that they don't really, they're not on the ground. They're not in the classroom. They're not on the street. They're in corporate boardrooms looking at statistics. And depending upon who's reading those stats and what biases they bring to those papers, you can read me and you could read the same stat, and that stat could be that we shouldn't publish this book because black boys don't read. And I could read that same stat and say we should publish this book so that black boys will read, right? So it just depends on who gets to make those kinds of judgment calls. That's the one thing I probably wish I had known. But the art is the art. I'm always going to put that first. I just wish I knew more about how the business worked.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the teaching. All right, who's got a question? Right here. This is so convenient. And we'll come to you next.
Hi, hello. My name is Callie. I'm here with my professor. Actually, I'm taking her English class. She's an Ivy. She's a professor at Penn. I read Long Way Down for class last week. Mm-hmm. It is a book in verse, and I was wondering, when did you decide that you wanted to take this form and make a book out of it? Because I'd never read a book that was written in verse before, and it was really cool.
When I realized that the prose version of it, which it was originally written in prose, when I gave it to my agent, she was like, "Yeah, it's cool, but you know, I make these books with young people in mind, right? Everybody, books are books. We all can read what we want to read, right? But with young people in mind." And so the critique was, are we really gonna get them to believe that this happens in a minute of this child's life if it takes them 2 weeks to read it? Right? How can we expedite the experience of reading so that they feel the tension and the stress of the story? My first discipline was poetry, right? It's what I know more than I know anything else. So I was like, oh, well, I've been looking for a place to put this other thing, right? This is my rabbit in the hat, right? This is my turn to finally pull out this magic trick that I never get to use in form, right? I use it in the prose, but like in form. And so I was able to sort of use enjambment as a way to kind of like heighten stress and you know what I mean? And it just kind of worked out that way. People have asked me to do it again. The new Spider-Man is in verse, by the way, and prose, both. It's in verse and prose. It comes out in a couple of weeks, actually. And it's the last Spider-Man, so we are clear. There's no more Jason in Marvel. That's a wrap. But like I was reticent to write anything else in prose. In verse, just because I think it's difficult, and I think my fear is that people will begin to sort of lean on it as a shortcut. That it's not a shortcut. It's harder if you're going to do it right. And so I'm very sort of picky about it. But here we are. It's happening. But I'm not going to do it again for a very, very long time, probably.
We have a question right here.
Hi, I'm here with 15 of my students.
These
Wave
are
your
your
hand,
people.
students.
Raise your hand.
So, my question for you is, what is the revision process for you? Because my students think, hey, let me do the pre-write. Hey, let me just finish the first draft, and then here I'm done.
Yeah.
So can you walk them through your revision process?
Yeah, first thing first, your first draft is whack. I just want you all to know that shit. I'm gonna tell you off the break. And the crazy, what's wild about it is that you think it's dope, and we all do at first, right? And then you give yourself a little space, give yourself a couple of days, and come back and look at it, and you'll see all sorts of holes that have illuminated themselves, right? And so the real question that I ask all writers, especially young people, because I get it. I was also a person who, like, for me, it was outlines. My teacher would be like, make an outline first. I'm like, you mean to tell me I gotta do work before I do the work? I'm like, I'm not interested, right? I still don't outline. But, like, that was a whole thing. I think for me, at the end of the day, there is nothing. How many of y'all are athletes? Any of y'all athletes? Any of y'all who came with her? A lot of y'all. All right. So then y'all know that the first time you make, let's say you're a ball player, you know for a fact that the first time you make a jumper does not make you a great jump shot shooter, right? That don't give you, just because you made one does not necessarily mean you're the best shooter. Everything requires repetition and practice. Everything requires adjustment and coaching, and everything we do in life is going to require the same things. Writing is not any different than every other thing you've ever done. It requires effort and patience and discipline, right? And that's it, and it should be hard. It is a hard thing to do. That's okay. And the truth is, there is nothing wrong with difficulty. I think y'all are the most brilliant young people, your generation, and I do mean this. I think y'all are the most brilliant young people to ever exist. The only issue I have is that y'all fold up at the sign of difficulty. Just because something is hard does not mean that you should not do it. If anything, it usually means that you should. Always be careful about anything that's a little too easy, because you think you're getting it off. And next thing you know, the people in the audience looking at you like, man, he ain't even trying. He ain't even practicing. I'll give you one more example of this, and this is how you'll know. Ballet, right? Is anybody a ballerina? Is anybody? Okay, so then you know this. We have one ballerina. Ballet, I knew a dude back in the day who grew up in the Russian ballet. He grew up in the wings. His parents used to run the Russian ballet. And he would always tell me, his name is Eugene Yelchin. He's a brilliant writer and artist. You should check him out. And for the old people in the room, he was the dude who invented the Coca-Cola polar bears. He drew the Coca-Cola polar bears. Yeah. Brilliant man. He was telling me how when he was a kid, he was sitting in the wing of the Russian ballet. And which is like at the time, the ballet, it's like everybody talked about the Russian ballet. And all these people were in the audience. And because of where he was sitting, he could see all the people in the audience weeping at the grace and the beauty and the precision and the excellence of the ballerinas. But when he turned his head this way at the ballerinas, he could see the blood on the floor, right? That's what it requires. In order for it to look as beautiful as it does, those women, their feet are bleeding on the floor. You can't see it from the audience, but their feet are bleeding on the floor, right? So when you ask me about the work that it takes to do this and the editorial process and the amount of times the amount of hours I've had to put in this 20 years, almost 25 years, right? I've been doing this every single day of my life. The practice, the rewrites, long way down, everybody loves. There's 40 drafts of that book. There's 40 drafts of it, right? Everybody talks about Ghost. You know how many times I had to write Ghost? You know how long it took me to write the first paragraph? Over and over and over and over and over again. There's blood on the floor. Right? But you shouldn't have to, you should be able to look at it and be like, man, I feel like, and this is what I always tell people, you should read it and be like, man, I feel like I could write a book. And if you feel that way, it's because on my side, there's blood on the floor. That requires an enormous amount of effort to make you feel like you can do the thing. That is that simple. Anything that look easy is because somebody worked real hard to make it look that way. Right? That's what it requires. Don't worry about it. Excellence is a habit. Excellence is a habit, right? Remember that. All y'all want to be writers or whatever you want to do, whatever it is, just remember excellence is a habit. We all got our habits. That has to be one of them. So that what's normal to you is excellence. So that when she's saying we got to do it again, you ain't mad about it. All right, I get it. This is part of the process. So
There's a teacher who wants to say how happy she is having heard that advice. Do you want to say anything?
I am ecstatic that you said that. Thank you so much, because it means so much more from you. They see me every day. They see me work hard, and they don't understand this is hard.
It's hard. And I get it, y'all. He probably, he traded on us, y'all. He ratted us out. But the truth of the matter is that stick close to your OGs, because what she's talking about is real. And I know it gets annoying, but stick close up under your OGs. All right, there's real truth there for sure.
We have time for one more question, and it's conveniently right here.
How long does it usually take you to write a book, or how do you come up with the ideas?
It just depends. It depends. We were talking about drafts, right? So it depends on the draft. You take a book and it just depends on where I am in my life, because some of these books, it's a tricky question, because some of these books have existed in here for years and years and years before I ever sit down to write them, right? I've lived with all the characters and Look Both Ways for years. So by the time I sat down to write it, which was 6 or 7 years after they all sort of came to be, it only took me 2 weeks to write the first draft. And then we went through the process, right? But that first draft, I wrote it. I was writing 10 pages a day. It was a weird thing that was happening, but that happens sometimes because they all were just sitting, they were ready to come, right? And then there are other times, you take a book like Patina, the second book in the track series. I thought Patina was going to put me down. It's a lot of work. You know why? Because I wanted to be careful. I wanted to get it right. I wanted to make sure that a world of girls, which that book is, right? It's like 2 boys. It's like all girls school, 2 moms, little sister, girls track team. I wanted to build this world, and I wanted to make sure that I was honoring the girls in my life without sort of pigeonholing them and turning them into these weird symbols of like neediness and all this silly stuff that happens all the time, right? And so that, like fighting over boys and all this silly. I'm like, how can I use my imagination to push myself to make something that's not cliche, right? So it varies. Every book is a different experience.
Jason Reynolds. Thank you. So we do have books for sale. We have the broadsides that are for you for free. We hope you'll. So Jason's going to be here for a little while. There's a limited amount of time, but he's going to be here, and he'd be happy to sign and inscribe your book. There's probably going to be a bit of a line, so I would just ask people who everybody has something they want to say to Jason about their reading experience, and I would politely, as your host, say keep that a little to the minimum so we can get the line. We're going to form the line on this side, so those of you who are in seats on this side should maybe help us by moving them or folding them. We'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. for brunch. Let's thank Jason Reynolds one more time for an amazing reading. Freeman, do you have a pen? So he can sign? Do you have a pen? Or get one maybe from somebody? Okay.
I just don't want to steal this book. This is
No, we'll get it to the writer's house.